happy flow, but that is not something that we might encounter in the real time. In real time, we might face some issues, and we should be capable, the robot should be capable of handling them. To do that, let's go into this particular flow where we can see set transaction status. If I just open that, in this case, in case of system exceptions where we don't know that an error might come, it will be directed to this particular system exception sequence. Here it's similar to the success and business exception sequence. Here we are adding some files, some information to the log files, and this is something which is different over here, and then we are removing those fields, and here we take a screenshot. This comes along with the RE framework, this particular XAML that you can see. There are some activities that are responsible for taking the screenshot and saving them to the project file, and then there is a sequence to close the files, close the applications that you are actually using. If you fail to close them, soft close them, it will try to kill them. Let's quickly go to this particular file, a XAML. Here you can see there's a condition that we can see over here. It says if the in-config file max retry number is greater than 0, we are retrieving this value from the configuration file and then converting into integer and then comparing this with 0. If this is 0, greater than 0, then we have to go to this side, but if it's not greater than 0, then we will go to the no side of it, and then we will try to increment the transaction number so that we will leave this particular transaction and move on to the next one. Let's see what's the default value that comes along with the RE framework. If you just click on config, in the constants sheet we will find the value called max retry number. It's 0 right now. So for this case, it will go to this particular path and it will increment and it will move on to the next available transaction. But what if we want to retry? You can change it to 1. For now I'm just using 1, and you can retry n number of times, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. But now, because the retry number is greater than 0, it will come to this, and the condition here is retry number is greater than or equal to max retry number. Our retry number now is 1 and the retry number is 0. If you can just go back to main and look at the variables, here the number is 0, right, for the first time. This number will be defaulted to 0 every time we have a new transaction. So this is being sent to this particular flow here, retry number. If I just go back to this, because this leads to the false, here retry number is 0, 0 is not greater than 1, so it will come to false. It will try to increment the retry number, not the transaction number. Okay, then it will retry it, and again if it's failing, it will retry it. So after that it will go back to this particular sequence, and from here it will go back. Because it's a system exception, it will go back to initialization stage, it will launch every application needed and all that, then come back to this. Because right now the transaction number is 1, it will directly send it to this and it will try to do the same things that it has performed earlier again. And if it's a success this time, it will directly go to this and increment the transaction so that it move on to the next transaction. And if it's a failure, it will again come to this particular blog, and here it will go to this time, because the max retry mentioned in the config file is greater than 0, it will come to this time the retry number is 1 and the max retry mentioned is 1, so it will be true, and it will come to this, it will just reset the retry number to 0 because it's an in and out argument. Okay, though the number came here is 1, the moment it is set to 0, it will be reassigned. As you can see here, the retry number is an in out. So though it is taking 1 as an input, whenever we are making some changes to it inside this particular XAML, the value available here will be reset to 0 so that we can proceed on to the next transaction with a retry number as 0. And here we are incrementing the transaction. So that is how this particular mechanism works. To do that, right, so whenever there is a system exception occurring, what we have to do is we have to move on to here. But here what we have with us is, in this, we have the sequence where we are trying to ask the user for an input and then we are launching the flow. But we don't require this to happen, right? We should not ask the user to enter the data again. But what it should do instead is it should launch the website again, because whenever there is an issue occurring, the RE framework will try to close all the applications and begin the process again. So we can just try to get this back to here, okay, and go to process transaction, and before launching or before starting this particular XAML, what we will do is we'll check for the condition. If retry number is not 0, okay, if not 0, then try to launch the website. The XAML, whatever we have used in the initall applications, we are trying to use it right here. Here let's look at the input arguments. It's expecting an in. So in this particular main XAML, the name of the config is config because it's the main file and the config is a variable. Here it is. So now what will happen is, whenever the retry count is 0, it will not launch this, execute this particular flow, because we know if it's 0, that's a fresh record and the site will be launched in this stage itself. But when it's a retry mechanism, then we have to launch it explicitly. So we have written the code for this, and when we will try to execute it once, let's see what happens. For that, to raise any error, what we have to do is we have to create an explicit exception to occur. Let's go into the process XAML and then search for the recipe XAML. Here what I will do is, after we find this and we enter the data, I will try keep a message box so that I can close wait. Okay, whenever we see a message box saying wait, we'll try to close this particular site so that it will not be able to find this and it will return false. The flow will be taken to the else part and we will have this throw over here. Okay, let me put a breakpoint over here and try to run it. Now I also have a breakpoint available here to see the mechanism of it. Okay,